The eye that sees through walls. My name is Jonathan Reeves, and I've spent most of my life searching for silence. Not because I was overly sensitive to noise or suffered from chronic migraines. It's just that there was always something more hidden in the noise, something others couldn't hear. Beyond the ordinary sounds, the hum of the television or the crackling pipes, I could discern alien voices. They were quiet, as if whispered through thick walls, and never belonged to those who lived next to me. At first, I thought I was going crazy. But over the years, I realized they weren't just my imagination. They were real. It all started when I rented an old house on the outskirts of Richmond, Virginia. The house sat on a hill, hidden behind a thicket of elm trees, and there was something about it that seemed to beckon me inside. The landlord, Mr. Grayson, handing me the keys, said only one thing. "If you hear a knock at night, don't answer." I chuckled then, thinking it was just another legend used to scare new tenants. But that same night, I realized the warning was serious. The house was spacious but gloomy. The creaking floorboards echoed, and the windows rattled in the slightest breeze. I stored my things in the upstairs room, where the window overlooked a vacant lot and an old brick wall. For some reason, this wall was unsettling. It seemed to be there not for protection, but to hold something in place. At midnight, I heard the first knock. 3 short thuds, as if someone were banging their knuckles on the wall. I held my breath. The thuds came again, but closer, right next to my bed. I pressed my ear to the cold plaster. And then I heard, "John, can you hear me?" The voice was muffled, feminine, as if coming from an adjacent room that didn't exist in the house. I recoiled, clenching my fists, trying to convince myself it was a dream. But the voice spoke again, more insistently this time. "Will you open the door? We know you're here, right?" The next morning, I went to see Mr. Grayson. He looked tired, his eyes as if hiding years of fear. "You heard it, right?" he asked, not even waiting for me to tell him. I nodded. "It started decades ago," he continued. "There's something within the walls of this house that wasn't meant to survive. We tried to seal the passages, brick them up, but it still found a way to speak." "What exactly?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. The old man looked straight at me. "The eye. It's watching. Even now." These words stuck in my mind like a splinter. The next night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat by the wall with a flashlight, a notepad, and a pencil. At precisely 12:15 a.m., the knocking came again. I touched the cold surface with my palm and almost jerked my hand away. The plaster was shaking, as if someone was breathing behind it. The voice came again. Now there were 2 of them, a man's and a woman's. They overlapped each other, whispering different phrases, sometimes in chorus. "We see you. Let us through. You're the one." And suddenly, a patch of moisture began to appear on the white surface of the wall, taking the shape of an eye. Enormous, lidless, with a black pupil. It appeared right in front of me and, I swear, watched my every move. I screamed and ran away, but in the hallway, the lamp flickered, and the walls came alive with a hum. The whispers were everywhere now. "Don't run away. You're our guide now." I slammed the door to my room, pressing my chair against it with my back. But even through the closed wood, I could feel that gaze. The eye didn't disappear. It was there. And it was waiting. I don't know how I managed to sleep that night, but the morning greeted me with a heavy head and an emptiness in my chest. I stood by the mirror, looking at my own eyes, and saw weariness in them, as if I'd lived through a decade in a single night. But the worst part was that the trace of what had happened remained. On the wall next to the bed, where the eye had appeared, the plaster had turned black, and a round crack stretched like a pupil in stone. I tried to rub it off, scrape it away with a knife, but the plaster in that spot was soft, almost like clay. And when I pressed harder, a hollow sound was heard behind it. Emptiness. I decided to examine the house more closely. At first glance, it was simple: 2 bedrooms upstairs, a kitchen, a living room, and a basement. But the more carefully I walked through the hallways, the more strange I felt. The distances didn't match. There should have been one wall, but in fact, the space was wider than the architecture allowed. It was as if additional passages were hidden between the rooms. That evening, I took a flashlight and headed to the basement. The stairs creaked, and the smell of damp assaulted my nose. Old pipes ran along the walls, and in their metallic hum, I heard breathing. Slow, uneven. In the far corner of the basement, I discovered brickwork, clearly newer than the rest. The bricks were a different color, as if something had recently been walled up there. I placed my palm against it. The surface was warm. And then the voice rang out again. "Jonathan, there's a door. You'll open it." The voice came straight from the wall. I recoiled, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. It felt as if I left, the wall would catch up with me. "You want to know what we see," the voice continued. "You want to know who's whispering your name." The flashlight flickered, and in that instant I saw a narrow gap appear between the bricks. A black breath, smelling of mold and iron, poured out. I ran upstairs, slamming the basement door, but my heart already knew, something inside that wall wasn't just waiting. It was moving. The next day, I met my neighbor. Her name was Rebecca Harper, and she lived across the street, in a small white house with blue shutters. She noticed me at the gate and came over. "You live in Grayson's house now?" Her voice sounded as if she already knew the answer. "Yes. Have you heard anything about him?" I asked cautiously. She looked at me strangely, a mixture of pity and fear. "There used to be a guy living there. His name was Adam. He said he heard something moving in the walls at night. Then he disappeared. No one ever saw him again." My throat went dry. Disappeared. He just vanished one day. His things were left behind, the door was open, but he was gone. They say he went into the walls. I wanted to laugh, but it stuck. She sounded too serious. "And one more thing," Rebecca added, lowering her voice. "We've all had this weird thing. Sometimes, if you look at the windows of your house at night, it seems like there's someone else standing behind the glass. Someone who shouldn't be there." That night, I couldn't take it anymore and went back to the basement. I grabbed a hammer, a flashlight, and a crowbar. My heart was pounding like it would burst out, but something stronger than fear pushed me forward. The brickwork rang under every blow. The plaster crumbled, the roaring grew louder. And then suddenly one of the bricks fell out on its own, as if it had been pushed from the inside. I shone the flashlight into the hole that had formed. There was a corridor there. Narrow stone, stretching off into the distance. It couldn't have existed. According to the house's plan, there was land in that direction. But it was there. And its walls seemed to breathe. "Go," the voice whispered. "We'll show you." And then, I swear, something opened an eye from the depths of the corridor. Enormous, glowing, exactly like the one I'd seen in my room. It blinked. And then the corridor began to pull me inward. I didn't realize how my feet had stepped into the doorway on their own. The corridor was pulling me in like a funnel, and resisting was pointless. The air inside was heavy, thick, smelling of damp and rust. The flashlight trembled in my hand, its beam bouncing across the walls, and the walls. They were pulsating. Every brick seemed to be breathing. "You're going the right way, Jonathan," a voice whispered next to my ear, though no one was there. Not much longer. I walked until I came to an iron door. Thick, with peeling paint, no lock, but somehow locked from the inside. I pulled the handle, and it gave way. Behind the door was a room larger than the house should have allowed. Round, with a high ceiling. The walls were riddled with cracks, oozing dark moisture. But most importantly, something towered right in the center of the room. A giant eye. It was embedded in the wall, lidless, surrounded by flesh that seemed both human and inhuman. It moved, its pupil following my every movement, and in the depths of the pupil, not I myself, but other faces were reflected. Men, women, children. Their eyes were empty, but their lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. I froze, paralyzed. "You have come," came a multi-voiced whisper. "Now we see through you." In that moment, I understood the truth. The house was just a shell, a screen. All this time, the walls hadn't hidden a secret. They were the secret itself. Beyond them, there was another layer of the world, and the eye was the door. "You will open it for the rest of us," the voices continued. "You will become a guide." "No," I croaked, trying to retreat. "I am not one of you." My eye blinked, for the first time. A cold gust of air rushed out from the cracks in the walls, and I heard footsteps. Figures began to emerge from the dark crevices. They were blurry, as if made of shadows, but I recognized their faces. Among them was Adam, the boy who had disappeared many years ago. His eyes were empty, and his lips kept repeating, "Join." They were approaching. I understood, if I let them touch me, I would disappear like him. I would become part of the wall, a voice among many. I broke into a run and dashed back down the hallway. The shadows followed me, but their footsteps sounded hollow and strangely slow. I flew into the basement, gasping for breath, and slammed the crowbar into the bricks, blocking the passage. When the last brick fell and the hallway disappeared, I fell to the floor. Silence reigned in the house. It seemed I had been saved. But only seemed so.